how do we, as individuals, make sense of history? Especially when it's told by the people who actually shaped it. Their perspectives are so personal, sometimes fiercely partisan.
Right. Can you really pull objective truth out of an account that's inherently subjective? It's a huge question.
It really is. And that's the core question we're diving into today as we tackle William P. Barr's One Damn Thing After Another, Memoirs of an Attorney General.
Barr's got quite the resume for this kind of insider view, doesn't he?
He really does. Attorney General under George H.W. Bush, then again under Donald Trump. Two very different presidencies.
Plus Columbia, GW law, even a bit of time at the CIA. He's definitely seen things from the inside.
Absolutely. And this book, it's hefty, almost 600 pages. It's not just his story, it's a defense of executive power.
And a strong argument that, in his view, progressive leftists are the main threat to American democracy.
Exactly. It mixes memoir, political commentary, legal analysis, all framed by those two administrations.
It came out March 2022, covering some really pivotal recent history.
Oh, yeah. The Russia investigation, Trump's Ukraine impeachment, COVID, civil unrest, the 2020 election aftermath.
And it notes his break with Trump over the election fraud claims, though he defends a lot of the rest of the presidency.
So our mission today is to give you a comprehensive analysis of this book. We want to help you navigate it, see the strengths, the weaknesses, understand the implications.
But without spoiling the specific stories or events he recounts, we're looking at how he makes his case.
Right. How claims are made, how they're supported, or maybe how they're contradicted by other evidence.
And just a quick note for you listening, you are experiencing a unique two-host AI conversation powered by Google's NotebookLM, designed for a deeper, more dynamic book analysis.
Okay, so given Barr's background and, frankly, the sheer size of this book, it's pretty clear he's making some big points. What are the main arguments he puts forward that we'll be looking at?
Well, it's interesting how the whole book seems built around three core claims, almost like pillars holding it up.
Okay, what are they?
First, he frames the Russia investigation as essentially a hoax, or he calls it a bogus narrative.
Okay, number one.
Second, Trump's famous Ukraine call. He describes that as foolish, but not criminal.
Got it. Foolish, not criminal. And the third?
Third, he makes the case that the progressive left poses the primary sort of existential threat to American democracy.
Right. So those are the big three pillars we'll be examining.
Exactly. Those are the core arguments our analysis really digs into.
And this is where it gets really interesting, I think, because for each of these claims, you have Barr's evidence, but then there's a lot of contradictory evidence, too.
A significant amount, yes.
Let's start with that first one, the Russia investigation being a hoax. How does he support that?
He argues the FBI investigation didn't have adequate predication, basically not enough reason to start it.
Okay.
He says it was based on raw, unanalyzed, and uncorroborated intelligence.
Yeah.
He also points to some findings from the Durham investigation.
Which he initiated.
Yes. And he argues investigators were biased, had a predisposition against Trump, and that there was just no evidence of collusion when it all began.
Okay, that's his side. But our analysis finds some strong counterpoints, doesn't it?
It certainly does. For starters, the Justice Department's own Inspector General found there was a proper basis to open the investigation.
Even with some procedural flaws noted.
Exactly. Flaws, yes, but the predication was deemed adequate. Then you have the Mueller report itself,
which documented extensive Russian interference and multiple contacts between the Trump campaign and Russians.
Right. And remember the Durham investigation. Barr points to it, but it went on for over 4 years.
And resulted in only 3 indictments, 2 of whom were acquitted.
Precisely. Not exactly a smoking gun validating the hoax narrative. Plus, federal judges actually criticized Barr's public summaries of the Mueller report, called them misleading.
That's quite a contrast, isn't it? How do you square those things?
It really highlights the challenge for you, the listener, trying to piece together what actually happened. It's complex.
So, if we take that same critical approach to his second claim, the Ukraine call being foolish but not criminal, how does he argue that?
Well, he states the Justice Department looked into it and found no campaign finance violation.
Okay.
He frames the call as just normal diplomatic back and forth, diplomatic give and take.
Yeah.
And says the impeachment that followed was just partisan politics. Overreach.
But the facts presented in the critique paint a rather different picture.
They do. The transcript shows Trump explicitly asking Ukraine to investigate Joe Biden, a political rival.
And military aid was being held up at the time.
Correct. Aid was withheld pending that investigation announcement. Multiple witnesses testified under oath about a quid pro quo. This for that.
And maybe most critically for Barr's perspective, he himself was named in the whistleblower complaint about that call.
Yes. And he didn't recuse himself from overseeing the DOJ's handling of the matter.
Which, again, makes you wonder how he squares his narrative with those established facts.
It's a point where his interpretation really bumps up against the documented evidence.
Okay, let's move to that broader, more ideological argument. Barr points the finger at the progressive left as the primary threat to democracy. How does he build that case?
He points to cultural changes, things like LGBTQ plus rights, critical race theory,
True.
stuff like that.
Cultural shifts.
Right. He argues something he calls militant secularism is threatening religious liberty, and that progressive policies are fundamentally undermining traditional American values.
But the critique argues back pretty strongly here too, right?
It does. It points out that the book doesn't really present systematic evidence of some kind of, totalitarian progressive takeover.
Democratic institutions kept functioning, right?
Exactly. They showed resilience during that period. The critique also notes that Barr's own view of executive power, his very expansive view, has raised serious separation of powers concerns among constitutional scholars.
Kind of ironic, maybe?
A bit, yes. And it also notes that religious freedom protections are still constitutionally robust in the U.S. It suggests Barr's framing is perhaps more political than analytical.
So this analysis we're discussing, it doesn't just look at what happened, but really how Barr presents it, how the book handles truth itself. Where does it land on that spectrum, opinion versus established knowledge?
That's such a crucial distinction for you to make as you read this. Our analysis suggests a lot of the book's big characterizations, calling the Russia probe a hoax, labeling progressives totalitarian, dismissing media as just biased. These are mostly opinions.
Reflecting his political view.
Strongly reflecting his political perspective, his partisan frame. Not really objective analysis, but it's not all opinion.
Okay.
The book does have valuable factual information. Things about DOJ procedures, legal precedents, specific events he saw firsthand.
Yeah.
His expertise in constitutional law, how the executive branch works. That provides real knowledge, genuine insights.
But even with that knowledge, the critique suggests his analysis is often undermined.
Yes, frequently undermined by sort of self-serving interpretations and that consistent partisan framing we mentioned.
And a lack of acknowledging other viewpoints.
Right, a real failure to acknowledge potential errors in his own thinking, or even just consider that there might be other legitimate ways to see these events. That limits the depth of understanding the book offers.
So does it achieve wisdom?
Well, our analysis suggests it rarely achieves true wisdom. If wisdom involves, the judicious use of understanding toward the highest ends, the book's partisanship, and honestly, a lack of intellectual humility get in the way. And for those of you interested in exploring these ideas of wisdom, understanding, and reflection more deeply, you might check out Mindful Moments. It's our YouTube channel offering AI book analysis, really aimed at inspiring reflection and rational thought on complex topics, just like this one.
Okay, that's helpful. Now, thinking about the ethical side of things, especially if you look through a lens like the Golden Rule, what does the critique reveal about Barr's positions there?
Applying that Golden Rule standard, would you want this done to you? It reveals some significant ethical asymmetries.
Oh.
Inconsistencies. Take investigations. Barr defends really aggressive investigations of Trump's opponents, but fiercely criticizes similar scrutiny aimed at Trump.
Would he accept that if the roles were reversed?
That's the question the critique raises. Probably not. Same with executive power. He argues for very broad presidential power under Trump, but he'd previously criticized Democrats for similar power assertions.
A shifting standard.
Exactly. It lacks ethical consistency. Now, even with legal standards, he seems to apply different standards of evidence depending on whether it's Democrats or Republicans involved. Think about his defense of Flynn and Stone versus how he judged Trump's critics.
The analysis also mentions the impact on specific groups, right?
Yes, it highlights how some of Barr's positions, particularly on immigration, LGBTQ plus rights, voting access, seem to disproportionately affect marginalized communities.
And his religious liberty arguments.
The critique suggests they often translate, in practice, to fewer protections for religious minorities and secular Americans. It's a complex outcome.
The book obviously touches on core American ideals from the Constitution. How does it measure up against those aims, like form a more perfect union or establish justice?
That's a really important question the critique tackles. Does the book actually advance those goals, or does it maybe hinder them?
What's the finding?
On form a more perfect union, the analysis suggests a negative impact. Barr's rhetoric, demonizing opponents arguably deepens polarization. It doesn't really build bridges.
And establish justice.
More mixed there. He defends some rule of law principles, which is positive. But that differential treatment we talked about, intervening in the Flynn and Stone cases, for instance, that undermines equal justice.
What about ensure domestic tranquility?
Again, the critique points to his inflammatory language about cultural conflicts, framing politics as warfare. That probably increases discord. It doesn't reduce it.
Are there any positives noted?
Well, his general support for strong national security aligns with protecting the nation. But the critique argues the book often falls short on promote the general welfare because it seems to prioritize partisan fights over broader policies.
And secure the blessings of liberty.
That's seen as contradictory. He advocates for certain religious liberties, sure, but the critique argues his vision might reduce liberty for others. And again, that expansive view of executive power threatens constitutional checks and balances, which are essential for liberty.
So it's a really complicated picture when measured against those preamble goals.
Very complicated. More questions raised than definitively answered, perhaps?
Okay, putting ethics aside for a moment, let's just look at pure logic. Does the book hold up logically?
Our analysis says, not always. It identifies several logical fallacies being used.
Like what?
Well, ad hominem attacks are pretty frequent. He attacks the character of critics, calls them whack jobs, militant secularists, instead of engaging their arguments.
Attacking the person, not the point.
Exactly. There are also false dichotomies presenting things as simplistic either-or choices, especially on religion versus secularism, like there's no possible middle ground.
Any others?
Cherry-picking evidence is apparent, especially around the Mueller report, where he seems to select only the bits that fit his narrative, and some circular reasoning, too.
Where the argument assumes its own conclusion.
Right, particularly with the Trump investigations sort of dismissing evidence because it conflicts with the predetermined idea that the investigations were illegitimate from the start.
So inconsistent logic depending on who it applies to.
Fundamentally, yes. He applies different analytical standards depending on whether it helps his allies or hurts his opponents. That really undermines the logical coherence of the whole argument. It feels less like analysis and more like constructing a specific reality.
So thinking bigger picture, what are the potential long-term consequences, the ripple effects of a book like this? And what does it suggest about maybe wisdom or even spiritual implications?
Yeah, the critique raises concerns there too. It suggests the book might contribute to a long-term erosion of public trust. Trust in institutions like the DOJ, the FBI.
By painting career professionals as partisan hacks.
Precisely, which undermines their legitimacy. His broad view executive power, dismissing congressional oversight that could set dangerous precedents, threatening democratic accountability down the line.
And the rhetoric.
The inflammatory stuff about cultural conflicts, it could deepen social divisions, make compromise even harder, and even his defense of religious freedom. The critique suggests this partisan approach might actually harm religion in the long run by tying it so closely to divisive politics and potential discrimination.
What about from a wisdom perspective?
Well, the tone of the book, lots of resentment. Score settling that seems to contradict qualities like forgiveness or humility, which are often linked with spiritual maturity.
A lack of nuance.
Definitely. His absolute certainty on really complex moral issues, the way opponents are demonized, it suggests a limited capacity for what you might call genuine spiritual wisdom, which usually involves grappling with complexity and empathy.
Okay, so let's try to wrap this up, really balance the scales for you, the listener, as you think about one damn thing after another. There are strengths, right?
Absolutely. The book offers valuable firsthand insights. You get a look into major events, top-level decision-making. Barr's legal expertise is undeniable.
It's an important historical record, even with the biases.
For sure. And he does have moments of, honest self-assessment, like admitting his wife warned him about taking the Trump job or acknowledging some of Trump's flaws. That adds a layer.
But the weaknesses, as our analysis highlights, are pretty significant.
They are. The critique concludes it functions more like political advocacy than objective memoir. That hurts its credibility.
We've talked about the factual disputes Russia-Ukraine, where his account clashes with official findings and evidence.
Right. And the logical inconsistencies, the double standards, the fallacies, they're woven throughout.
Plus the inflammatory rhetoric that arguably fuels division.
Yes. And ultimately, a surprising lack of deep self-reflection. He rarely seems to consider he might have been wrong or that other interpretations could be valid.
So this leaves us, and you, the listener, with some big lingering questions.
Definitely. Like, How do those federal judges' criticisms of his Mueller report summary square with his claims of accuracy in the book?
Yeah, and why did he apply such different standards to similar cases involving Trump allies versus opponents?
Can that really expansive view of executive power actually be reconciled with the checks and balances the Constitution sets up?
And does calling progressives an existential threat, does that actually help democratic debate, or does it just shut it down?
These are tough questions to wrestle with.
So here's a final thought for you to mull over. How much is our understanding of history just fundamentally shaped by the subjective lens of the people who lived it?
And flowing from that, what's our responsibility as readers to critically evaluate those accounts, to check them against other evidence, against ethical considerations?
It's a big responsibility.
It is. And for those who want to dive even deeper into the specifics, there are plenty of resources. The full Mueller report, the Durham report, the DOJ Inspector General's report on Crossfire Hurricane.
The actual Trump-Ukraine call transcript?
Right. Plus various court decisions, academic analyses that look at Barr's actions and statements. And remember, you could explore Mindful Moments and our podcasts for more insights on how these complex topics connect to reflection and rational thought.
We really encourage you to click the link on screen for the full, in-depth book analysis we've been drawing from today.
Please subscribe, share, maybe purchase the book via the link if you're interested after hearing this.
And above all, think rationally.